Welcome to Cohesive Friendship Unit. My name is Chris, just me today. I've been having a look at the launch titles for Google Stadia and just kind of having a thought about single player games and how they might work for streaming services. And I kind of want to dive into my hypothesis that is actually there may now be a real justification for single player games to be developed. In the past few months and years, there's been a strong argument that single player games just aren't worth the investment when you could develop those everlasting games as a service games. And I kind of want to explore the possibilities of all this. But before we dive into things, guys, if you love us, please sub us, consider giving us a sub, like the video, and let me know if you agree with this theory down below. Also, we are planning on announcing a giveaway probably in the next week or so look forward to that. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is kind of how the proof is in the pudding, right? We're seeing single player games be pushed on these services. And I want to start with the Stadia launch titles. I'll be rolling a list of Stadia launch titles, but I just want to highlight a few. Note, Stadia launched with 22 games. They boosted it from the original 12, and of those 22, there's an alarming amount of single-player games. We're talking Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Final Fantasy 15, Metro Exodus, Rage 2, the Tomb Raider trilogy, and perhaps one of the most ambitious single-player games ever made, Red Dead Redemption 2. And that is interesting, right? Like, in a world where people are saying single-player games aren't selling, why is Stadia launching with so many single player games? And then I kind of thought about xCloud, but xCloud's kind of weird, right? Because nobody's paying for that yet. If you're in the closed beta, we did a review if you want to check it out, by the way, but nobody's actually paying for that yet, so they can kind of just put whatever games they want. Also, they're kind of leaning on their exclusives right now to test the game, to the service, which is really good. But then I looked at PS Now, which we also did a review for that you guys are welcome to check out. And what I noticed was during their marketing campaign where they dropped the price from $20 a month down to $10 a month, they made a big point to add a couple core single player titles, including God of War and Grand Theft Auto 5. So why are all these companies bundling single player content and really pushing single player content? And my thinking, right, is a couple of reasons. One, longer games can draw you in, they can drag you in, and they can keep you paying for that subscription service. A 60-hour single player experience like Red Dead 2 has good reason to get a player invested for more than 1 month. It's pretty unlikely that you're going to finish Red Dead Redemption 2 within 1 month of Google Stadia. And I understand that Google Stadia, you're buying the games outright, but we'll assume that if it's something that you're super excited for, like something like Cyberpunk, it's an event, right? It's a big launch, and you're going to want to play that at 4K. So yeah, you pay for the extra cost of playing it at a premium because you want to experience the single player in the best, highest fidelity you can. So yeah, you drop the money on the subscription service and you buy the game and you get the best experience you can while you're playing that single player game. So that can loop you into something like a Cyberpunk or a Red Dead Redemption 2 on Google Stadia. For more traditional subscription services like PS Now, again, God of War is not a short game. Grand Theft Auto 5 is not a short game. I really don't see most people completing that game in a month. So you lock them down, right? You say, all right, this is almost a guaranteed 2 month of subscription, maybe even more. And if you can roll these single players out at a good pace, that helps, right? And the next thing I want to talk about is streaming in general and how that introduces more lag than what your traditional gaming experience is used to, and that can make online experiences not so good, especially in early days of streaming, especially for Stadia and xCloud, which doesn't even really have Ethernet support as of the time of recording. Streaming introduces latency, there's no question about it. Sometimes the latency is tolerable, especially if you're doing everything you can to reduce latency, like using wired controllers, like using Ethernet cables, and like using low latency screens. But the fact of the matter is latency is there, and when you're playing online games, there's already additional added latency, so you're kind of compounding the issue, right? Online games, online shooters, probably aren't as fun streaming. And again, we're going to wait and see the long-term effects of this, but maybe slower paced games are fine, but I personally wouldn't want to play something like Halo exclusively through streaming. I checked it out, it was tolerable. This is not the best way to play. And that might be part of the reason why, at least early on, these companies are going to navigate you towards single player experiences, because once you add another online component with our additional lag, you're not only going to perform, you're going to perform poorer than you would normally, and that might frustrate you as a player. You might notice the blemishes more readily, and it's just going to make the experience worse in general. And the last thing I want to talk about on the kind of positive spin of things is that the cost of games is no longer trying to sell a single product. Justifying the production of a single player experience is kind of a bit murkier now. Instead, a single player experience being developed is kind of the cherry on top of a streaming service now. If you look at how the justification was being made the past few years, where big companies were saying single player games were dying and they weren't worth the money to invest, the argument was there's no real value in developing a $60 product that historically won't sell as well, and we can't tie additional transactions into it, and it's not an everlasting piece of content. Now, that's a little different, right? That's a little bit murky. And I know that Stadia is a little bit different, but at least as far as we're aware of xCloud and Stadia and Game Pass to an extent, even though that's not streaming, if you're no longer trying to sell a $60 product, you're trying to sell a monthly subscription fee. So games don't have to succeed in the same ways that they used to, and we're starting to see that with Xbox. And I know Xbox had a rough generation, but the way that they reported things stopped being about reporting concrete sales numbers and reporting more players, including players who engage with the content in Game Pass. And what that means is if you have tons of people playing the Outer Worlds rather than tons of Outer Worlds sales, that means that a lot of people engaged with Outer Worlds on Game Pass, which ideally means that Microsoft is locking people down on a subscription service. So you can use a big name title like God of War to lock someone down onto PS Now. And it's less about sales, because again, you're not developing a $60 product, and it's more about getting people in, using these big name games. And the last thing I want to talk about as kind of a negative twist on all this, right? So these are my reasons why I think, yeah, at least in the short term, I think there's strong proof that single player games might kind of have a minor resurgence. But I mentioned you get someone playing something like a Red Dead 2, that could take 3+ months to really feel complete on that game. So we might start to see a weird artificial inflation and grind, which we've already kind of started to see on these single player games. Assassin's Creed Odyssey has been partially guilty. There was a Lord of the Rings game which was also guilty of kind of creating artificial grind in a case where you could actually pay to alleviate the grind or just play a needless amount of hours of the game. And there might be some weird data collected, data driven sweet spot for the ideal length of a game where people don't get frustrated and people pay the subscription, right? So maybe for a 20-hour game, sure, everyone will hop in for a month and it'll be fine. Companies might try to make that 20-hour game squeezed up to maybe a 40-hour game. and maybe get people to grab that extra month. Maybe they'll try to push for a 60-hour game, even though the content of that game is really a 20-hour game. And that's, I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you think that's a possibility. That's like a worst case doomsday scenario. But those are my thoughts on single player games and streaming services. I hope you enjoyed the video, and that's all for me. I will catch you next time.